Welcome to the Autism in Black podcast, where we focus on all things autism and the Black parent experience. Our goal is to always educate, support, and empower parents to advocate for not only their children, but themselves. I'm Maria Davis-Pierre, a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida and America's #1 autism advocate for Black parents. I'm the founder and CEO of Autism in Black Inc., where we aim to include the excluded.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Autism in Black podcast. I'm your host, Maria Davis-Pierre, licensed mental health counselor and the CEO and founder of Autism in Black, Inc. Today, we are here with another wonderful speaker for the 4th annual Autism in Black conference. We have Meghan Ashley here. Meghan is a mental health therapist, a licensed therapist who specializes in behavior change with multiple populations, including autistic individuals and women of color. She has spent 5 years as an adjunct professor and continues to educate the community and colleagues via workshop facilitation and creating courses and groups about behavior change, adult autism, and empowerment for all. Her experience in higher education, inpatient, and outpatient therapy treatment all pour into her currently owning and operating Imperfect Consulting, a mental health service company. I'm excited to have you here today.
Thank you.
Learning about you and what you do, and especially your focus on autistic adults has really been something I'm so super excited about, because I know that that's a population that doesn't get a lot of light shined on as a late diagnosed autistic myself. It's why I do what I do, and finding others who do, similar is just so fulfilling. So
Yes.
I want to jump right into it, because I know that your workshop that you will be presenting on at the 4th annual conference focuses on adults adapting to autism, and it's becoming increasingly relevant as more adults receive diagnosis later in life. Can you share some insights into why this demographic might face unique challenges and some opportunities in understanding and embracing their autism diagnosis?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the late diagnosed population is so special for multiple different reasons. They were able to create these coping skills for themselves as they were growing up that they didn't even realize were ones that were accommodating their autism. So they have a different perspective when it comes to how they live now as autistic adults, based on the fact that they did not know that they were autistic the entire time. So it is definitely a unique population, a unique perspective, a different way of viewing the world. And sometimes it can lead to them feeling like they were broken, or they weren't right, or they felt like an alien in the world. And so they were just trying to figure out how to make it and how to get from one day to the next. So I think that with that population, you have this perspective of, this is how the world looks and this is how I can fit into it. And also, this is how I can adapt my situations to fit me a little bit better. After they've realized that they are autistic, then a lot of the shame and the guilt falls away, and you just replace it with understanding and care for self and love for self. Because now you get why all of these things that happen throughout your life, all of the experiences that you had, you start to see them through an autistic lens, and things start to make sense. So I usually say after diagnosis, people get this flood of memories where it's like, oh, okay, well, that was because I was autistic. And so I think that that's very interesting that they get that chance to look back on their lives in that way, and they can use it as an opportunity to learn and grow about themselves.
I love that. As someone who got their autism diagnosis 3 years ago, this explains me perfectly. I've shared about it on the podcast. I share about it a lot. Like, when I got the diagnosis, because I wasn't even going in to get an autism diagnosis, I was going in to get some ADHD medication, came out with another diagnosis. So it was like, oh my God. And then as I've accepted my diagnosis, had my ebbs and flows of giving myself grace, and all of these memories are like, oh my God, girl, did you miss that? Yes, now it makes sense. Girl, what is going
Yes.
on? That is like, oh, yep, that's definitely autism. So
Mm-hmm.
the flood of
Yeah.
memories is so true because it's just like everything's coming back. Like, girl, that's why you was doing that in elementary school, girl. Like,
Mm-hmm.
is so true and learning so much about yourself. So
Yes.
you make great points also about the coping skills and the coping mechanisms and strategies that I know I had developed. I know I
Mm-hmm.
was heavily masking, and it was one of the reasons that the diagnosis was caught, I guess, when I went to get my ADHD medications because I was in an
Mm-hmm.
autistic burnout because of
Yes.
all of that masking.
Mm-hmm.
And how does your workshop aim to support individuals like myself in reconciling their past experiences with their newfound understanding of autism, knowing that they have developed these coping mechanisms and strategies?
That's a great question. Thank you for that. The workshop helps support the late diagnosed autistics by making sure that they understand that everything you did to get to this point, it's okay. It's
Mm,
absolutely okay. And what you can do is thank your past self and tell them, like, I'm so glad you were able to make it to this point, but right now, let's find a different path. And the different path is, how can I do this with love and care for myself and less of the shame, the guilt, and the trying to fit into a box, a square peg in a round hole. Let's now give you the square hole that you were looking for the whole time. So it's very much reconciling your past self with your future self, and being able to understand that even though this was the life you had before, that the life that you're looking for now can be attainable, and going to that and moving towards that by finding different coping skills that work for your autistic self versus working for the self that you thought was broken before. So, yes, certain things you did, you figured it out. Congratulations. I'm so happy for you. Moving forward, we can do it a little bit more affirming, a more strength based. It doesn't have to be a, why can't you just blank, blank, blank? It's going to be, my autistic strengths mean that I can do these things. My autistic struggles mean that I have to find different ways to do other things. So I think that that support from community, especially other late diagnosed autistics, such as myself, I'm late diagnosed as well. And I really resonate with your story of going in for the ADHD medication and coming out with the autism diagnosis. And
mm,
I think that that's so important, especially for female presenting people, people of color. We mask so hard just trying to assimilate into the greater community that
mm,
that's why a lot of times it took so long for us to be identified, because we were so good at cosplaying as like
mm,
people. Like, we're people too, but we've been like kind of playing as this other person for this whole time. And once you get into burnout, that mask drops.
mm.
And when that mask drops, you don't know what to do. And you show up in someone's office and they're like, hey, have you thought about an autism diagnosis? And that's how that goes. And so
Help.
I just want to congratulate everyone who's come to this point in your life, made it this far. You did everything you had to do. Now you can lay down some of that heaviness and
Mm.
pick up some things that can help you along in the next part of your journey. And that's what the workshop is supposed to be
I mean, first of all, you just healed my heart. I felt like you was talking to me directly. I'm like, oh, I might need to sign up for a session. You definitely gave us, as a fellow therapist, I heard all the therapeutic tools in what
about.
you said, and I appreciate it because nobody's talking to the autistic adult late diagnosed community.
Yes. Hmm.
It's something that I've started to step my toe in after getting my diagnosis, because when I was looking for resources, I was like, nobody's talking to us. I don't know if I'm feeling this by myself, or if it's just me, or if there's other people who are feeling this. And you're right, we have to reconcile with our past self and do other things differently. That
Hmm.
alone allowed me to give myself so much more grace, because I
Yes.
was kept trying to meet these standards that I knew that I couldn't. And
Yeah.
I didn't know why I couldn't. And it was like, what is going on? What is wrong with me that I can't do this? And then after
Yes.
getting the diagnosis, it was like, girl, this is
That's
why
it.
you
Yes.
can't.
I tell my clients all the time, you're trying to measure yourself with a neurotypical yardstick, measure
Ooh,
your progress, measure your growth, measure yourself in general with this yardstick. But the autistic yardstick isn't straight. It looks like a curly Q.
mm.
So with you trying to measure yourself with someone else's yardstick, you're always going to come up short. It wasn't made for you.
Oh my God. You are dropping these gems today. Listen, y'all, I had all these pre-written questions and it is going, I feel like she's talking to me. I'm
I'm
getting
glad though.
healed right now. So I thank you for that. Because it's so needed. And like you said, we are measuring ourselves with this yardstick. And I think for me, as someone who sits on this platform and talks about it all the time and can give out the information of this is what we need to do, I'm never applying it to myself. So to hear
Mm-hmm.
your words and be like, girl, you need to leave that, go get your curly Q yardstick.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Because
Mm-hmm.
that is for you. What you've been using is not for you. So I
Mm-mm.
appreciate that. And I know that people are going to truly learn um, from this yardstick. And I know that you mentioned earlier that um, autistic adults may have previously felt broken or
Mm.
misunderstood before receiving their diagnosis.
Yeah.
How do you approach helping individuals navigate this transition from feeling misunderstood to embracing their neurodiversity or neurodivergence?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I help them embrace it by helping them understand what they need and who they are. My approach is very strengths-based. Autism does have struggles. We're not going to gloss over that and act like it's a superpower and nobody struggles for anything, because that's not helping anybody either. So we talk a lot about strengths and struggles, how to maximize your strengths and how to work through your struggles, because it's all part and parcel of it. It's all part of your journey as an autistic person, as an autistic adult. So a couple of things that I talk about for how to care for yourself and the new coping skills. Sensory is king. That's number
Mm,
one.
mm,
Sensory is king. That's one of the most unique parts of an autistic person, is the way that you take in sensory information. So we cannot just say, oh, I hear things a little bit more, I see things a little bit more than other people. No, you have to treat sensory with the respect that it deserves from you, and
mm,
therefore make sure that your sensory systems stay regulated. Always find that way to bring yourself back to homeostasis, back to baseline. That is so important, because if you don't, you're starting off on a foot that's already behind. You're already behind. If everyone else is starting off on 100% battery, like a phone at the beginning of the day, you're starting off on 25% because you didn't take care of your sensory stuff first. So we
mm.
want to give you a chance to have a great day, and so that's part of it, is understanding your sensory profile, your sensory experience, and rolling with that. Second thing I want autistic adults to understand is to ride their energy waves. You're going to have ebbs and flows. That's okay. I don't need you to try to operate at high level energy all day, every day, because that's what you think you're supposed to do. I would love for them to recognize when their energy is having peaks and valleys and roll with that. When my energy is lower, then I'm going to do things that reflect that, and I'm going to take care of myself because I deserve to be taken care of. And lastly, I would love for them to learn enough about themselves so they can adjust their environments and adapt the world around them to fit them, instead of them trying to adapt into the world that's already not made for their neurotype. So
Mm.
just really creating your own accommodations. You're going to make your own IEP plan for your house, for your
Okay.
job, for church, for the zoo. I don't care what it is. Make your own accommodations and make your world that you're in every single day. Make your car, your home, your granny's house, whatever it is, make it fit for you so that you're not walking into spaces already feeling broken and wrong.
I know I am super excited for your session at the conference. And I know people listening are probably geared up and they want more information. But y'all got to get your tickets and come to the fourth annual Autism Black Conference to hear this full workshop. Because I know that this little bit has just healed me so much. and made me understand a lot more about myself and not feeling alone and feeling a community.
This episode of the Autism in Black podcast is sponsored by Amazon, our title sponsor for the 4th annual Autism in Black conference, and Grantmakers for Girls of Color, our gold sponsor for the 4th annual Autism in Black conference. Special thanks to Amazon and Grantmakers for Girls of Color for their sponsorship and making an impact.
And I do want to talk a little bit about you getting your diagnosis later in life and what that experience was like for you, if you don't mind sharing. I wasn't going to out you, but you talked about it, so now I'm going to.
It's all right. No, and I think that that's such an important thing too, is as a fellow therapist, outing yourself as autistic can go one of two ways, especially in the therapeutic space. And so here I feel safe to do so. But is it something that I have written on my website? No. But am I on neurodivergent directories? Yes. So I feel like the people who get it. And the ones who find me for that reason, they understand that part, but it is still a stigma on autism, especially on adults. And a lot of people just don't understand what it even looks like, especially in our own field. Yes. And so I think that that's a whole nother session, whole nother subject that we could talk about for days and days. But yeah, my diagnosis journey started, and mine was a little bit different than most people's story. So I've always been interested in autism. It's always been something that's been a focus for me from elementary school, because I had a best friend whose brother was autistic, and I absolutely loved hanging out with him. I thought his brain was the coolest thing in the world, and I just wanted to know everything that he knew, and he was all about airplanes. That was his special interest, and I would just sit and just listen to him for hours, and I thought it was the coolest thing. And then I grew up and I went to graduate school, and in one of my programs, in my practicum, I started a group at the college I was working at called the Other AA. It was Autistic Alliance. And so we were all grabbing the autistic students on campus, getting them together, and we would have these meetings where we would talk about like what's going on in their lives. We would talk about dating. We would talk about friendship, all the things that college students were going through as autistics as well. And so again, I'm always having these touch points with autism throughout my life, throughout my career. I end up going to work in an autistic center after I graduate, all these things. And I keep saying to myself, I love the way autistic brains work, and I really get them. I didn't realize I got them because I was them.
Yes.
That was the thing that was different. And at that point, still in my career, still didn't recognize. Had kids, both my kids got tested, they ended up being autistic, and I was like, again, I understand them because I am them. And the things that the doctors were talking about in their evaluations, I was like, oh yeah, that's not weird, I did that too.
Exactly.
That's not different. You can ask my mom, I did that also. And so then it started to kind of spark that conversation of but I did that too. Yeah. And so I started thinking about it, still didn't catch on, started working with autistic adults in my own private practice, looking into doing autistic evaluations for adults, all of these things. And then one day I was reading through one of the evaluations for autistic adults, and it was made especially for autistic adults. And I started reading the questions, and I just kind of subconsciously took the exam, and the score was so high that it couldn't be ignored.
Wow.
Wow. And so then I started to do that flooding thing where I'm looking back on my memories and looking back at them through an autistic lens. And then I did the most autistic thing possible, rabbit hole of adult diagnosis and all the tests and all the things like that. And that's how I ended up on my journey for evaluation.
Thank you for sharing. Something that is very similar in your story and mine is when my oldest got her diagnosis, and then even my son, one of my twins got their diagnosis, I related so much to their experience that nothing they did was considered weird to me. It was like, okay, and like, it was easy for me to accept them having an autism diagnosis and being autistic because I related so much to them. I was like, okay, yeah, they don't like to eat that. I don't like to eat it either. That's a sensitive thing for me too. So I related so much to them. And in my session, when I was going to get my ADHD medication, I didn't even get a chance to tell the man about my kids being autistic because he was like, you not see, he didn't know what I do. He didn't know my platform. He's just like, nobody's talked to you about this. Like, he was shook, and I was shook that he was like, are you bringing this to me about this? And I actually was like, you know what? I'm going to need some testing, because he was a psychiatrist. He was like, here's your diagnosis. I was like, I think I want some evaluations.
Let's get some data behind this.
Feel a little bit better. He's like, I know what it's going to say, but went through it, and he was right. And I was like, you were right. He was like, yeah, you could have saved your money. But it was just that the whole thing of, this is why I relate so hard to my kids, because I saw myself in them, and it wasn't even clicking for me that it's because we're all autistic in this thing together. So I think that is a common thing for a lot of parents who have children who are autistic. They're like, oh, yeah, I do that too. So thank you for sharing that piece of yourself with us. I appreciate that. As we wrap up, I really want to ask you, what are outcomes or transformations do you hope participants will experience as a result of attending your workshop?
I want them to walk away with shared experiences, understanding that what you go through, what you went through, what you're going through is not you alone, that it is common for late identified autistics. It's common for autistic adults. I want them to leave with that feeling of your experience is common. We're always talking about autistic acceptance, autistic appreciation, and part of that is normalizing your experience. So that would be a huge part of it, is understanding that what you're going through is common for an autistic adult. Period. End of sentence. That's number one. And then I want them to have actionable steps on moving forward. How you can go into tomorrow feeling better than today. How you can continue to adapt your life to the autism you now know that you've had the entire time. And, just what's the next step? How can I feel better? How can I live my life more authentically so that I am happier, I'm healthier, and I'm whole?
I love that. I really felt like I needed this session for myself because you were speaking to me. I truly appreciate that. I appreciate your vulnerability. I appreciate your scope of work. And I want to give you your flowers for that, because oftentimes we are not given our flowers for the work that we do in this community. So thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for the lives that you are impacting, because I know that if they're getting just amplified version of what I got today, I know that you're out here changing lives for autistic adults. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Of course. And where can individuals find you? Where are you licensed? What states are you licensed? Because I know that they are going to be trying to sign up for some therapy and get some of that work that you're doing.
I am licensed in Texas. I'm a licensed professional counselor supervisor. So I also expand my reach by teaching other up and coming therapists about autistic adults and how to help autistic adults specifically. And I'm very proud of that, like being able to reach back and pull up the next generation of therapists so that it does not end with me. I don't want my legacy to end on this generation at all. We're making a better world for the autistics of tomorrow, so that by the time they get here, it's all normalized. Their experience will be a common autistic adult experience. So I do that in Texas. You can find me at imperfectconsulting.com. That's my website. And there you can read blogs that I've written. I have all kinds of different information and things there. I also do testing for adult autism. So if you wanted to come and get tested, I will do that too. And I really specialize in women and people of color coming to get tested, because that's like my main focus, where I'm researching and doing things, and I'm able to identify autism in people in populations that are usually overlooked. And I think that that's very important when you're going to get an assessment. Make sure your assessor understands your experience so that you're not overlooked and just looked right past again,
Exactly. That's one of the big things I talk about when talking to our colleagues, is that they have to realize that our culture comes in the room with us, and that the biases are inherently built into that evaluations that we use, into that DSM that works my nerves to no end.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and I will
yes.
get started on that platform because y'all know how I feel about that DSM, okay? It's
yes, no, I'm with you on that. Yeah,
it's a reason
even
why I stepped back from doing a lot of therapy work because of just the field and the biases and things of that nature. So I really appreciate that you are training up and coming therapists in our field to be able to work with autistic adults, because there are not too many evaluators that can truly diagnose autistic adults, add in Black and woman. It's hard to find. So I appreciate that you are doing that.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm absolutely with you on the DSM thing too. Me and the DSM have a hate relationship to the point where when I put the diagnosis at the bottom of somebody's report, I translate it into strength-based language, like to say like your diagnosis is autism spectrum disorder, and I don't write in what the DSM actually says. I flip what it says to be strength-based because I don't even need them to bring that negativity into the next chapter of their life.
Come on. I love that. I love that. We are changing the game out here, y'all. So I appreciate that. You guys need all of our fellow therapists and colleagues. I don't care if you've been in the game 10, 20 years, you need to be learning from this, because we are out here and we need to be having the same kind of experience in therapy that other people are getting. So make sure that you are following Meghan, make sure that you're coming to the Autism in Black conference to hear this workshop, and make sure that you are booking consultations with Meghan. So thank you again for coming on here, dropping these gems. I appreciate it. And thank you all for listening to another episode of the Autism in Black podcast, and catch us on the next episode.
Thank you.
If you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can always be notified when a new episode drops. To get the resources shared on today's podcast and the show notes, make sure to go to autisminblack.org/podcast. Don't forget to share your takeaways from the show on your IG stories and Twitter using our official hashtag AIBpod so that we can find and share them. If you want to continue the conversation from today's episode, join our Autism in Black podcast Facebook community at facebook.com/group/AIBpod.